Am I
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the DustViz 7 Habits of Highly Effective Designers. So, yeah, our structure for today is we're going to have a presentation for about the first half. We're going to go over some, we'll call it the good and the bad and the ugly of graphic design. We'll kind of do a very short, just what is graphic design, and then we're going to go over the 7 habits. And then finally at the end we have an exercise where you guys can design a poster for the next DustViz sessions and incorporate some of the habits that we will get into. So, I got a little note sheet floating around here. Let's see if I can figure out what that is. But, there it is. Go ahead and you can get started. All right, do we have our intro slides on there too? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, well, so what is graphic design? Very simply, it's presenting a simple, what we're going to do today, I guess, is just present a simple set of principles for novice designers to follow. Just kind of some key things if you've not done a lot of design work or not just, not had a lot of experience with creating graphics or charts or whatever, just some layouts, some simple things that you can just kind of refer back to that might help improve your final product. And why are we going to go over these 7 habits? Well, you have to know the rules before you can break them. We say that, once you know the rules, you can push the envelope and start making, making your own creative design and graphics. So, just to start, we'll do a brief introduction of who we are. Most of you guys know who I am, but my name is Mike Foster, and I am academic staff member here at DUST with teaching GIS for most of you, and then I do GIS, data viz, graphics work as well. So I have been working in either the graphic design or, for me, cartography field for about 8 years now, and most of my focus has been on cartographic design in maps. So yeah, for my first job out of my undergraduate degree, I was at the graphic design firm, and we did maps for textbooks and travel guides, and we did infographics and stuff like that. So just a few examples of some of my work. This was a National Geographic Atlas that I participated on the project team on, and this was a map of northern Minnesota. But yeah, it's, my experience comes focused from the map design aspect, and I'll let Anne-Marie.
I'm Anne-Marie. Most of you know me. I'm an MC2. I went to architecture school and did a lot of graphics there, and then worked kind of doing a lot of freelance graphic design. But those examples I'll talk about later, so don't look it up too much.
I'm Chris Ree. I am the relative newcomer to design. I started picking up a couple of years ago in design skills, urban design skills. And since then I've done a number of projects. Worked on a website for a friend there. I've been doing a number of sustainability and environmental reports layout for different agencies and NGOs lately. And then I've designed a few t-shirts here.
All right, so that initial question that we were just discussing, what exactly is graphic design? How is it different than just, what kind of design is it? What is it? Well, so one of the guys that you're going to hear us refer to a lot throughout this presentation, probably, there are going to be a handful of names that you'll hear dropped, is Edward Tufte. And one of the ways he kind of describes, one of the ways you can think about graphic design is it's not how much information is there, but rather how effectively it is arranged. The point is, it's not so much how much you can fit into one graphic or how, how much noise, I guess, you could fit, or how much content you can fit in one graphic. It's how effectively you can use the graphic that's there. So yeah, I guess to start with just a definition, graphic design is essentially the art of communication, stylizing, and problem solving through type and image. That's, I guess as opposed to what you would just call, art or whatever, as opposed to, it generally has a highly functional or utility-driven purpose, including such things as like, building a logo or, such things as like logo or conveying a brand or, kind of conveying a message. You're trying to communicate something to your audience. Composition is of high importance, and by composition we mean utilizing the elements around you or that are relevant to your message in as effective of a way as possible. So you're taking pieces of whatever it is you're designing. Say you're designing a logo for a company, you want to take bits and pieces of that company and compose them into a graphic. Certain, 4 big areas that graphic design focuses on are typography and font, choosing the right typefaces, choosing the right fonts, color palettes, choosing what colors you're using, whether you can use saturated colors, washed out colors. Page layout and balance is a very big one. If you're setting the layout for a brochure, knowing just kind of how to balance your page and align objects. And finally, I think another big topic is manipulating images to help enhance your design. So what we've got here are a number of different visual variables, is what we call. These are different properties that you can actually change within objects on your page, going from feature to feature, or object to object, or image to image, typeface to typeface. They include things such as position, length, angle. Your position, you can obviously move a circle around on a page. Length, you can make line different length. These are all just different properties that you can take charge of and manipulate to help improve your image or change your image or manipulate or your ultimate end design product. So, next. So these are, graphic design is really common in urban planning. Chris dropped a couple of these in here. Do you want to say a few words?
Yes, these might be familiar to students who study urban design in CBD. This was the first, this is ancient Rome, you can tell by the, what do you call it?
Form.
Plaza.
Yeah, it's a plaza. Oh, piazza.
Piazza.
And this is called a figure-ground relationship. So it's just about positive and negative space. And this is a very common technique that's used in urban design today. Here's some other examples in planning. This is by Kevin Lynch. If you don't know yet who Kevin Lynch is, you very soon will. Very famous member of the MIT faculty who came up with a new idea of imaging the city. And this is Boston, and so it's meant to be representative and communicative, not necessarily accurate in a cartographic sense, but it's meant to communicate ideas about where people gather, what they view as barriers and nodes within the city. Here's another one. This is from the New Urbanist School, if you will, by Andres Norby. And this represents the different patterns of settlement and development in the city, from a very rural area to the most dense urban area. And this is all about communication.
All right, now we'll play a little bit of that good and the bad and the ugly game I had mentioned. As most of you guys probably saw at some point, I think the link went out to the department. The MBTA had a competition this past spring to redesign their ever so, I don't even know what you would call it, infamous T-map right now that people either love or hate. But yeah, so we actually have here are, this was the winner of that competition.
What?
Yeah. Which, you know, I guess when you read through and look through it, really actually, you know, it does add some items that weren't in the other one. Like they include every station line on the green line and items like that. But this is going to be, you know, one of our. It really, you know, considering the balance and layout and everything, it really actually is very good design. So we'll use this as one of the good examples. But in my opinion, I don't know how many of the submissions were you could be qualified as good. This is one of the few. But anyway, here was another one of their submittals. This is the red line. And this is actually a really kind of a neat concept. I think it's somewhat poorly executed here. But you'll notice if you look at this closer, these bars actually represent time. So, you know, this would be, here we go. Each bar is about 5 minutes. You know, part of the problem with this is the connections between the lines are pretty vague and kind of hard to tell. And then from a design standpoint, as a design snob that I am, some of the text is very tough to read, and the fonts are just, they don't really do it for me. But
like, if you were to say, if there were two things that they could do right away to make it better, what might those be?
oh, two things I would definitely say: decrease the line size or increase the symbol size. You kind of lose where the stops are a little bit. And I would say figure out some way. I mean, well, another immediate solution I would say would be to align your fonts. Like you can see here, these are overlapping the line, whereas on the other lines they are separated by a little bit. And this was also a submission, and I don't even really know what to say about this one. I think this is a commuter rail line, but I don't really know. And God knows what all those other bus lines. But they got a pretty wide spectrum, and seeing some of these will make you appreciate that first one a little bit more. But this is where we're going to put this one into the ugly category for numerous reasons. Does anyone have any sample or any thoughts on why?
You can't read any of the labels.
The labels actually overlap ridiculously. But yeah.
If you got rid of the label, it'd be a cool like visualization exercise to see how much ground you were covering, but as far as useful for navigation, it's not.
This is, yeah, I completely agree. This is incredibly cool in theory, but the utility of this map really is for navigation, getting around the city of Boston in the most, you know, simple, quick, you know, you gotta glance at this as you're running for a train and be able to know where you're going. I don't think anyone can glance at this and be able to figure out what's going on. So, let's move on. All right, so we're back to what we'll call the good. Like I had mentioned, we'll talk about Edward Tufte a decent amount. One of the things, he is kind of, how would we describe him? Kind of a preeminent designer of our time or something, I don't know.
Yeah, he's a professor of art and graphic design at Yale, and sort of like single-handedly has brought like acuity in graphic design back to the forefront of.
And he's a fascinating person to go listen to. If he ever comes to town, I highly recommend it. Plus, he gives you all of his books for free, well, for the conference registration or whatever. But this is one of the examples. One of the things you'll hear him talk about a lot is what he calls chart junk. And chart junk is essentially stuff that ends up on a graphic or on a graph or a design or whatever that really is just noise. It doesn't actually communicate any information. This is an example where essentially every line on here represents some type of information. This was made by Menard. I'm blanking on his first name. So, I believe he is a French data visualizer. There we go. But this is a graphic depicting Napoleon's march into Russia in 1812 through 1813. The wideness represents the number of troops as they moved on. And as you can see, people either peeled off and came back, or died, or passed away, or whatever. And you can, what this does is it's an infographic that illustrates over time from what is presumably the border of France to Moscow, right here. Then their march back. So they left with how many people? It's kind of blurry because of the pixels here, but they left with hundreds of thousands of soldiers and men, and came back with about 10,000. So what it represents is really tragic, but this graphic is infamous in that every single line on here actually is tied to conveying the information in some way. On the bottom here you have daily temperatures, and then you have encoded. This is actually encoded like a map. So you travel across the ground, you can see. It's a good visualization of what happened. So we're just going to put this into the meh category. This is something that Excel will just give you. It's not bad, but thinking of that chart junk example, there's a lot of stuff on here that's redundant, or you don't really need. And another thing that I don't like about this one too is an important consideration. You guys are creating graphics for your thesis, for presentations, for clients in the future. To think about your color selection and making sure that the widest audience possible can read your color selection. This one, I'm going to guess, is not very sound when it comes to being visible for colorblind viewers, and that's what one of your goals is going to be when you're making graphics. But again, this is just going to it's not even going to go into it's not going to go into the good or the bad. It's going to kind of go into the meh category. This is going to go into the bad.
Oh.
I actually just pulled this off of the Atlantic cities recently. They're talking about these number of cities that use alternate, or use bike, walk, or transit alternatives to cars. You can't tell what city is what, and they use multiple colors at the same time. So don't do this. Can anyone think of some suggestions that would improve this right off the bat?
Was it an interactive map, or was it?
No, this is just,
Okay.
I don't know, a piece of paper.
Just picking 5 cities, like having it that
Exactly.
just look at New England cities, or letting people pick the 5 cities they want to see on a map.
Mhm.
That's too many.
Or even just widening it a little bit, put some labels closer.
Yeah, one thing they could do is group the cities, either by the size of the population or by the region, and then put those bars together and do them the same color. That would be one way of organizing it.
Mm-hmm. Take it down from maybe 30 categories to 6, or something like that. You have your top tier, your...
You're also wasting a tremendous amount of space by repeating colors and then having the names. If they actually reoriented the page, use the space better, and just had the text on top of the colors, you wouldn't be repeating all that information.
I mean, do you even need it in a column graph or chart?
Oh, I mean, not necessarily. That'd be something else you could explore. Or to reorient it so you would actually be able to...
Do a scatter plot with the names.
A scatter plot could be a solution, which might actually show a trend line of sorts. So.
We have a lot of other pictures to look at.
Yeah, okay, we'll continue on here. So this is what I was referring to when I was talking about chart junk. These look cool, but stuff like this really, in some ways, gets in the way of your message or what you're trying to tell. So you have to be very careful when using this type of illustrative style. And we'll go through these fast in the interest of time here.
This is, I put a series of lecture posters on here. This one I think is pretty good. They use alignment really well. They use only 3 colors, but they use them very effectively to highlight different information. Let your eye follow like the dates in white and the names of the speakers in sort of that bold black. And then there's they use a picture rather effectively because it ties right into the theme. Here's an example of a poster that's a little bit less effective. The text sort of disappears against the background. It's very difficult to see. The spacing is weird between the letters. So I don't really think this one is working that well. And then here's a third one, which is just you know, something that you see pretty all the time. The reason that this doesn't work well, the colors are not as thoughtful. The pictures you see are different sizes, not really aligned, so your brain has to do a lot of work to try to find the information. Whereas the more effective poster, everything was consistent, and so you could very easily follow from one thing to another. And it was able to communicate better. Here's a series of municipal websites. This one I think is one of the best. This is the Milwaukee Police News. It's a very fun website to sort of browse through. I'd recommend checking it out if you want to see something that's well done. You'll see that they stick to one main message per page. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but rather than try to overwhelm you with information, they have one main message, and then there are sort of browser tabs for you to sort of scroll through it. Here's one that's pretty good. It's the city of Los Angeles. You know, they try to organize everything in a way that your eye is able to follow. There's maybe still too much information, though, happening here that they tried to jam onto it, and then they got a best of the web finals. And then sort of the ugly.
Oh,
no.
I think you got. I think meant one you got.
Okay. Well, the ugly was City of Cambridge, but this is not City of Cambridge.
No, but this is very ugly. There was another slide in here that had the City of Cambridge website, and this is also an ugly. So.
All right. So now that we're going to go through a lot of different images, because a lot of what we're kind of starting to do, and the best way to learn graphic design is just to train your eye. Look at a lot, look at what works, why you like it, measure the margins, measure the height, kind of just like it just takes time. So Chris and I are going to go through kind of these 7 habits that we've identified with some examples of both professional designers and also us and some of our friends and people that are kind of just getting started. So it's not just people that get paid. Right, you didn't.
Oh, sorry. Less is always more. So this is like by far the most important rule. Whenever you are starting off, always try to keep this in mind. And it's not always about the amount of information. You can actually have a graphic with a lot of information, but just the way you organize it so that the viewer doesn't have to do as much work, the better. So we're going to talk about how to use negative space effectively, and we'll get into a little bit about this last line, which is remember the rule of small multiples, and we'll show you some examples of that. Okay.
No, you
Yeah. So just as when it comes to composition, that is the way that things are laid out on a page, using negative space is just as powerful a tool as using positive space. So we showed that map, that Noli map of ancient Rome that had the figure-ground relationship. We're going to think about how to use that very effectively too. You'll notice here these data visualizations. The one on the left you probably recognize as Manhattan. And one of the clearest indicators of that is the shape, first of all. But second of all, that large negative space in the middle, which is Central Park. You'll also see that here, the borders and the roads are not used, but you can still gain the shape from it. On the right, this is what we mean by small multiples. When you have a lot of data, one of the things that you can do, one of the techniques you can use is to align everything in very small sizes, I suppose. right next to each other, so you can immediately draw comparisons. So you can see where there's the most density. This is dropped by year. So you can see where there's the most density, that's where the driest year is, and vice versa. This is my birthday party last year. Again, using negative space, only use as much information as you have to. It can be kind of fun if you want as well. This was, it came out a little grainy, but this was last year's t-shirt, Dust t-shirt, also inspired by that birthday party invitation.
Notice Iran in the middle of the bottom.
So this is all about communication, right? Because he actually has a little bit of, he's got like a little bit too, but this works better. Again, very powerful image, amplified by the amount of negative space that's used here. So you immediately see the graphic up top and center, and then when you need the information, there's actually quite a bit of information on this poster, but it's not central to the message of it. So it can be sort of de-emphasized. Some more examples of figure ground maps, and also small multiples. You can draw comparisons very quickly between these different city forms. Yet another example. Yeah.
Those are nuts. The second rule is be hierarchical, and I've always kind of think about the hierarchy of the page or whatever you're designing. So communicate the relative importance of data through variations in size, line weight, intensity of images or color. And really a good test is you should be able to squint and really clearly understand the simple hierarchy of composition. And the way I start designing is actually just by a lot of little thumbnail sketches. So you're drawing out like the key relationships and where your eye is going first, and what's dark and what's heavy and what's kind of lighter. And I'm also designing the negative space that we were just talking about. So a couple of examples of that. This is probably my favorite graphic designer named Francesco Franchi that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But if you kind of squint and look at the page, you see how you kind of have this big image in the middle, and then the couple really heavy boxes. And there's a ton of information on this page, but it's organized in such a way also really effectively with some really thin dividing lines. It kind of divides up different parts of the space. And he uses color very, very simply, and kind of also has a hierarchy of line weight, color, and kind of the fill of the boxes.
When you say line weight, you mean literally the thickness of the line?
Yes, literally the thickness of a line. So in Illustrator or whatever you're using, I guess PowerPoint, yeah, that's not PowerPoint's there. But it will, like you're literally defining the thickness of a line of 0.25, and it actually corresponds to how it prints. Here's another example. I actually don't even know exactly what it's showing, but there's so much information, and it's the color is used effectively, and with a lot of like alignment and a hierarchy. So your eye goes to the pieces of information that the designer wants you to look at first. Good design has craft. So actually, Chris wrote this, and first I thought that really meant literally good design, like there's craft within a well-designed page, meaning you can design, if you have a lot of stuff to fit and a lot of the pieces are bad, that doesn't mean that it has to come out like crap. But that also, the craft also stands for contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, we found out. So that just like these key principles, there's a lot of overlap in terms of the concept of hierarchy, but allow your audience to easily follow these connections between your ideas. So for example, another Francesco Franchi where he just everything is aligned really, really clearly, and some hierarchy and repetition of different ideas.
And again, just notice how balanced everything is. Everything is very nicely, like, everything is justified and in distinct areas that you can pick up very quickly just with a glance at the screen.
kind of same here. Oh, kind of the same
Yeah.
things to talk about. It's just like good principles. Also, there's alignment margins are really important, and you typically want margins a lot thicker than you think, but not necessarily. Or to say that bad design is usually could be bad because it has really narrow margins as well. But this is actually a friend of mine who is a little complicated, but it was an architecture competition where they ended up fitting so many different layers of information and so much information. This is actually a plan view of a bayou in New Orleans, and there's a timeline down it, and then this also contains their whole design proposal. There's another thing, so you're not supposed to understand the whole thing on this page, but because of how they, because of their use of opacity in this lake, and then all of these different line weights and different, different hierarchies on the page, they're able to fit it, and it doesn't look terrible. I mean, it takes some time to look at, but it looks really effective. And this is also the same people did the same thing, but has a ton of information on it, and maybe it's a little confusing to look at, but because it's aligned and because they've used color a certain way, and they've introduced it at different scales, you could follow it. You might have to take the time to look at all of that. And this is actually Stephen Kennedy, who graduated and used to lead a lot of these DustBiz sessions. Actually, he founded DustBiz. But yet again, this is a really good use of color and use of different line weights. So these lines are really thin. Actually, what does this show?
This is the red is parking lots. So it's parking lots. This was from Iran's book.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I think we can talk about contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity in all of these. Actually, contrast, you can clearly see what's built in terms of the buildings as well as the parking lots. Repetition, showing the same sort of area, the same scale over and over again, so you can draw easy comparisons. Alignment, everything's lined up. And then, proximity and repetition sort of going hand in hand here. Just two fonts. So one of the easy mistakes to make is trying to throw in too many fonts, and you can really get away with just one or two fonts. And you can use those different hierarchies: size, weight. You can make it bold or not, and some fonts have many weights to choose from. So just stick with two. And we also said here, generally speaking, sans serif. So do you know what serifs are? It's like these little caps on the fonts. So generally speaking, serif fonts work best for written type that you're going to read in a newspaper or a book. Sans serif, which are much more simple and modern, tend to work better for electronic media, like websites. For titles, you can sort of go either way. So here's an example of just two fonts. In a dictionary, you can look up any dictionary, and they use just two fonts. They're different weights. Here's a bold one. Here is all caps in a smaller size in italics. But very effectively, doesn't cause your eye to do as much work as using 5 or 6 fonts as they could have done. Here's some sample layouts. This was from the DustBiz portfolio workshop, and the whole presentation is online as well. And again, just using one font here, you're able to achieve those different hierarchies, using size, using the weight as well. Here, they don't even use different colors, but you could use different colors, different transparent opacities, if you will. So if you want to make this a lighter color, you could do that as well to emphasize it.
And notice too, going through the samples that are shown, the other of the habits that are incorporated into some of these. This is another good example of using alignment and you know, some of the other habits.
Here's just one font, and then a secondary one up there to the top right. And another one. I think this is basically one font as
Yeah,
well.
it's pretty much all one font with different colors and then using alignment to pack a lot of information.
And yet another example. And again, you can achieve those hierarchies and differentiate information.
And this is a poster actually that I did for the New Economy lecture series last year. And they're only, yeah, it's same thing, it's only 2 fonts.
Here are a few fonts that we chose. These are pretty standard fonts on most Adobe programs. Casalon Pro is actually the one we used for this presentation. Georgia and Garamond are both 2 good serif fonts. They're also standard web fonts, so you'll see them a lot. Helvetica, you know, very, very commonly used. Frankly, Gothic Book, Open Sans. Open Sans is a Google font, so free to download. And you'll see these fonts over and over again, and designers keep going to them because they're very well designed by the typographers who created them. So you don't have, even though you have like hundreds of fonts on your computer, you know, I probably stick to the same 10 fonts all the time, and just keep going back to them because the effective ones work for you.
And there are a lot of like open source fonts and like designers doing like cool things that look really cool. And sometimes that works, but use it minimally and kind of sparingly or just for a certain heading, and then just like people, you kind of notice people kind of go crazy with like a lot of crazy fonts, and your eye gets tired looking at that actually.
Magic number 12. So here we're going to talk about proportions. And the reason that 12 is a very useful number is because your eye very naturally wants to see proportions of 2, 3, and 4. This comes up over and over again, and 12 as the least common denominator ends up being, least common multiple, ends up being a very, very useful number. When you're setting up a layout, I always use 12 columns, so I can split it up into 3s and 4s. 12 is also really helpful for font sizes. You may have noticed that the typical font sizes are 12, 24, 36 point. And that's, again, like these proportions that designers stick to over and over again. So those are very, very helpful to use. The exception is when you get below 12 points, so you might use 10 points for applying text. But here's an example of a sort of 12-column layout, or in this case, a 6-column layout. No, this is 12, because here you can see that it's split into 2 halves on this side, and here it's sort of 2/3 and 1/3. So this is a very simple, easy layout that you can use when you're designing. Newspapers often stick to a 6 or 12-column layout. It makes things a lot simpler. Here is an example of this book is actually on one side, it's in 4 columns, on the other side it's 3. And these are very natural proportions that the eye keeps wanting to go back to. So just keep the number 12 in mind.
There's actually a book by that designer that I just Fascia is mentioning about how you design newspapers and magazines. That's what it counts. Imitate, beg, borrow, but don't steal ideas for beautiful graphics from experienced designers. As an example, last year for my GIS project, I looked a lot at this. I swear I look at other designers as well, but this guy came out a lot. And I tested a lot of the colors that he chose, and actually just literally like pasted it into the file I was looking at, and then did the color grabber, what's it called? The eyedrop tool for my final GIS project. And then also looking a lot at how he's using a hierarchy of bold and italic and smaller, finer print. These like thin lines to separate different types of information, and kind of the general border and margin that he uses. And so this was me and Amalia did our final GIS project on voter disenfranchisement in Florida. And so there were a couple issues with actual data underlying this, but I think the layout was kind of effective. And we were able to fit a lot of different information and different types of information across the page. So this is the whole country and within Florida itself. And then this is by county, and this is actually a graph of looking at had people in prison been able to vote in Florida, how it would have affected the outcome in the 2012 election in every different county in Florida.
So do you remember that bad graph, that column graph that we looked at before that had all the cities in different colors? I mean, look what Anne-Marie did in this example. And so immediately you get this data that shows a pretty wide variation. But the name of the county, or the name of the city in the previous example, wasn't necessarily the most important piece of information that you need to be communicating. So I think if you always have that in mind, like what do you want your viewer to understand from your graph, that's helpful.
But there's also an example that I like directly took inspiration and literally colors from other places, and it's all right to do that. I mean, you don't downright copy, but everyone's learning from other people, and the internet is such a great resource.
I will say I actually have I have a physical folder at home in a drawer of just like graphics I've found in magazines and stuff, and thought, oh, that looks cool, and just thrown it aside. And I have, one on my computer too. I'll stumble across something on a website and just like, all right, that's neat, and just dump it into a folder. And if you ever have a creative block, it's a good remedy to go just dig through. Doesn't have to be many, just 4 or 5 examples of what you think is good design.
Is there a color grabber tool be outside of Adobe, like in GIS or in Word?
There is, if you, I know a couple of web browsers have color grabbers.
Okay.
There's a plugin, I don't know exactly what it would be for Firefox, but if you use Chrome, there's actually like a little eyedropper app you can install as part of the browser that will allow you to grab colors off of web pages, and then it will keep a little color library for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
So at the end of this, and also available online, we're compiling a bunch of resources, different tools like that, different websites that have designers and things like that. And one of them is a color.
Speaking of colors. So like well-written paragraph, each graphic should have a singular message. So use your color effectively to highlight differences. So for this one, I'm going to show a couple of infographics that I produced. And actually on the left is the original piece of data that I got, in this case from buy.com. And this was a project where I was looking at emissions in the supply chain. And sort of what we got on the left was from Excel, and I literally took that same data and put it into the graphic. And focusing on the message, which was that there's a difference in the emissions from brick and mortar stores versus e-commerce. That allowed me to de-emphasize a lot of the noise, a lot of the extra information that's in here. So it still appears, you can see like warehousing still appears on the other graph and it's color coded. But the colors aren't so divergent, it's not distracting the eye as much. Here's another one from the same project. Again, there's a lot of contrast between these two bars on the left. So I actually separated. I said that maybe it doesn't necessarily need to be a bar graph for both pieces of information. So I made a bar graph for, oh sorry, this is, as you can see, the inverse relationship between shipment size and transport charges. So the larger vehicles have much lower transportation charges. Yeah.
What program did you actually make the chart in?
I use Adobe Illustrator, and what I did was I pasted this image right onto my artboard. I traced the box, and then I sort of like played with proportions in order to create the graphic on the right. If actually, there is a way, if you create graphics like this, and you create the original one in Excel, if you right-click it, you can save it as a picture. If you save it as a PDF, you can open that in Illustrator and modify the colors or the line widths or whatever you want.
And same with GIS, you can export to Illustrator and do all of the color and line widths in Illustrator.
The upcoming session will be on how to get a map from ArcGIS to Illustrator. So you can make it look prettier.
And
Not yet to be scheduled yet, but sometime in the next few weeks.
OpenStreetMaps is also
So OpenStreetMaps.
factor of here are a couple of those color resources on the web. This one's called Color Brewer. This is the one that I used to pull the colors for the previous graphic from. And you can choose here the number of different colors that you want to use. Here you do the nature of the data, so you can do sequential, divergent, if you really want to have a lot of contrast, maybe one that's qualitative. And then it has a few other tools down here that you can use if you want to make a colorblind save. And here's where if you don't have a color picker, you can get the RGB codes. And if you enter these into Illustrator, you can reproduce the color. Another one is colorschemedesigner.com. I don't use this one as much. This one actually gets into color theory, which is taught in graphic design schools, about sort of the complementary and divergent colors, depending on where they are on the wheel. I won't get into too much, but this is another resource that you can use if you are having trouble picking colors. All right.
Yeah, so we have now, if you guys have a computer and a graphics program of your choice available, we have an exercise.
Do you have any questions?
Before we get to that though, yeah, any questions, thoughts? We just went through a whole bunch of information there. So.
It's obviously much easier to manipulate things in Creative Suite than in like Office. But I find for group projects, if I don't want to be the only person working on it at the last minute, it needs to be in PowerPoint or Excel or something that everyone can access. Do you have any tips for making things look nice using PowerPoint or other Office programs?
Yeah, so I actually had a slide on the different programs that got lost through corruption, but you can certainly do it. Adobe works well because it's been developed over time with designers in mind. So it's very technical. Unfortunately, it's not conducive to sharing files very well, but it's a very powerful tool. You can do almost everything in PowerPoint. The problem with PowerPoint is that the default templates are very bad. They're very bad.
Go in the ugly category from earlier.
Yeah, actually, Tufty has a great essay on PowerPoint.
Oh, he hates PowerPoint. It's actually, so I went to, like I mentioned, I went to one of his conferences during his sessions, and he refused to use PowerPoint, which is actually a kind of an experience when you're in a room of 300 people watching a speaker, and he gives you like a handout beforehand, and then he just speaks. So it's interesting, but
yeah. I mean, he basically says it makes us lazy. And the reason it makes us lazy is because we have these templates. You can just create a bulleted list. You can create secondary bullets. But it doesn't really follow the rules that we present in here. Like, things don't align well. They don't use hierarchy very effectively. That's a big one. The fonts are typically too big. And you don't have as many opportunities to draw lines with thin line weights. So you can use PowerPoint effectively. It's just that it takes work to get there.
I think we explicitly didn't want to present this as like how you do something in Illustrator because the concept you can translate anywhere. I do use PowerPoint a lot so that I'm not the only one working on presentations. And my first rule is I just clear out any template. I only have blank pages. And then I design, like you can draw lines and you can change the line weights to the same weights that you would get used to in Illustrator to make it thinner. And then you can set your own like alignment, not like, you can't use guides and things like that. But then if you just highlight it and do like Control-C copy, and then I think I might do is Control-F, so it's paste in place. Then you put that on every page. Then you don't use any of the defaults ever that they give you. Then you kind of can get the same thing and you can design it like from scratch.
And I would say just like, I guess kind of an obvious answer too would be, if you're designing in PowerPoint, you can still follow some of the rules of thumb that are, that apply to everyone, so like if you're working in PowerPoint, it's a good way to, use principles like only 1 or 2 fonts, or, balancing your page, or using alignment. You can still do that.
I also think the color scheme and font piece can make a really big difference, even in just seeing like the groups that I've been a part of using PowerPoint that did have a designer on them, where all of a sudden it was like, I didn't even know you could make those colors happen, where it just looks then so much nicer no matter what else you're doing.
Do you have any tips for using color when you know that what you're going to be using will be projected?
Yeah.
Projected?
Like on a projector?
Oh.
Or printed.
Yeah.
So they're actually, you can find color palettes online that are specifically designed for web design. As far as projecting onto a projector, I know you can use, like, the number of colors you can use does drop. It's a good question by how much or how many, but I would say a lot of, like, a good guideline to go from would be to go from using your infinitely your infinitely colored palettes where you can pick millions of colors to maybe choosing some of like the 200 best for the web or stuff like that. Because when you're projecting, you're on a screen. When you're looking on a computer, you're also on a screen. So you do have that common thread going there. And I can, we're going to put we have a resource sheet that's still kind of in progress that we're going to send out some links to some of these like color palettes and some of these resources and stuff.
There are really particular color palettes that deal with that. It's tough, but yeah.
And in general, like rules of thumb too, like when you're working on paper, you can use much smaller font sizes. It's suggested to never go below 6 point, pretty much no matter what. But if you're on screen, rarely, if ever, go below 12. You're gonna run into different presentations, different pixel sizes. It's just that your computers can be very inconsistent. So building in a little bit of a buffer with a bigger font if you're going to be projecting is a good rule of thumb.
Related to the question about like printing versus projecting, even it seems like every printer like will print out the colors so differently, or like the clarity of the image or whatever. Is there a way to know? Or like to adjust instead of like printing on the printer, you're gonna print from and like readjusting the yellow and the red like manually, and like then printing again and seeing if it's better. Like, is there a way to like make them align or something for your computer to know what the printer is going to print out like?
I wish.
Yeah.
That would be, printing is, any graphic designer I think will say printing is a mother.
Yeah.
It's not, because every printer is just slightly different. You're going to get something that will look one way on the screen, will look one way on one printer, and a different way on another printer. I don't know if you run into any crazy things or solutions, but
any way to make them align? Like, there's no trick to make them like. There's no
just if you know what printer you're going to be going from, running a proof or two is never a bad idea.
So a lot can be conveyed really effectively in black and white, and getting good at that and not having to use color all the time. Sometimes you do and it really adds, but there's a lot of great work in black and white.
And there are, say for example, if you are working in Adobe Illustrator, you can use, if you find colors that work, you can save them, and they're called swatches. So if you are going to be consistently working from the same printer and you come across some colors that work, you can create a little library in most graphics softwares. I think PowerPoint has that, and I think a lot of the Office programs actually have the ability to save colors. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
So if you guys want, we had an exercise prepared to test out some of these, the habits, and create a poster for the next couple of Dustbin sessions, and we all each created one as well. So at the end, we can kind of like look at what we can compare. That's on that website.
So if you want to stick around and play with graphics, please do.
Yeah. So there are instructions. We have a print sort of prompt here. Basically, we're going to be making an 8.5 by 11 poster with a certain amount of information about time, location, and content of the workshops.
No, I guess I should ask, are people interested in doing this? Okay.
And then if you go on, this is my Athena space, so if you want to download, there's a couple of images that we can
Or
use.
just, you can grab one just to keep it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And so this is actually Henry's graphic idol. He maintains this list of just websites and blogs and designers. There's some newspapers on here, there's apps, there's some various tools such as some JavaScript libraries, and then like I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of just blogs, and then guys who websites for famous designers. And go ahead, and we printed these out for everyone to have a couple. This is a great little resource just to go click through. And as we mentioned earlier too, we're kind of putting together a similar type sheet that we'll probably post to a page or something at some point and get it printed out for tonight.
Thank you.
Well, should we just show our different takes? Feel free just to take a copy of the exercise, and it's just kind of a fun thing, whatever you can do to remind yourself to think of those principles while you're designing, and those we can call her a night. Then.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to do some work on the plan?
Yeah. On
Like the actual plan?
the actual main part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can get some stuff done before Alex gets back, and then
Is he not back yet?
I think he gets back at 8? Maybe not.
I think we got back at 8.
Oh. Well, we'll see. Let's go do some plan. I made some progress on my perspective. I'm going to show it to you
Alright.
and get your feedback, because there's something wonky with my, like, one side of my fence looks real.
And the other doesn't.
I like it.
Not real.
So
Thanks,
these are our
Chris.
three very different takes.
That was one of the assets that Mike chose.
The assignment has like 4 images that you could use. Then we just did.
Yeah,
So it was, essentially, you'll read on there, it's like you've been asked to create a poster for the next, 3 series and 3 workshops, and they want the logo and one of the 4 images provided included in some way, shape, or form.
Cool. How do you guys find good images or like sample images?
I just went-
Google images or?
I just went and dug stuff offline.
Let me show you one of the tricks in Google is, let me tell you what we got. MIT.
There we go.
If you go to search tools, you can search by size, and then you pick a large image. You can do the same thing in Flickr. Then you'll get a really high resolution image that works well.
You can always manipulate the images in.
What's the deal with